Hello, welcome to Herdstone Painting. My name is Mark and today we're going to be painting a Beastmen Wargor, in this case a Battle Standard Bearer. This is an old model from the original Beastmen army box. I think it was released for 7th edition, and as far as I'm aware has been unavailable since. It used to be online for £50 to £100 on eBay, so I've never been able to get my hands on it, and when it came out on made to order I just had to get one. It took a while to turn up, and we finally got around to painting it. So, without further ado, we're going to start with the skin and the fur at the same time. So we're going to get in with Mechanica Standard Grey and paint all of the flesh. This matches my army. It's an old force from 2009-10 time. So things are getting a bit blurred here. We probably would paint this differently now, but I'm trying to get it ready for my actual force. So go around and do a nice thin coat of Mechanica Standard Grey on the flesh, and then get in with a smaller brush and do the same thing. Make sure Rhinox hide is nice and smooth, and you want to probably do 2 coats here and paint over all of the fur sections. And once that is finished, we're going to wash all of this with Nuln Oil. Be quite liberal. You kind of want to douse it almost and then head back in whilst it's drying, and ensure to remove any pooling from the miniature. Now this is quite an old model, so the wash is going to settle in places that maybe you're not used to because it is metal. So make sure as you're doing this just to keep an eye on it, because the plastic models are quite smooth and it will roll off much faster, whereas with this guy it will settle in all kinds of strange places. We're then going to go in with Mechanica Standard Grey and relayer over all of the flesh sections. So we're going to leave that Nuln Oil in the recesses. Again, this is quite watered down, so it should show any residual wash quite nicely through the paint. We'll then get some Dawnstone, and we're going to do quite a heavy highlight here, picking out all of the edges of the flesh, all of the muscles where possible, and glazing it over any higher areas. This is a character model at the end of the day, so we're going to put a little bit more effort in than maybe we would with the standard rank and file. We'll then go in with a bit Administratum Grey and then do a fine highlight on the tips of the nose and around the muscles and the knuckles and places like that. Now the fur is, rather than going in and picking out each individual piece of hair, there's a lot of it. We're just going to dry brush some Gore brown over all of the hair sections. Be careful not to get it on the grey where possible, but a lot of the models not been painted yet, so you can be fairly loose whilst you're doing this. We're then going to dry brush even lighter. We're going to feather the Baneblade Brown on this fur now, just on the top elements or the ends of the hair, especially on the head. But again, be careful and take your time as you run around it. And then finally, just to finish off the skin and the hair, we're going to do a bit of Fleshed Hair as red and just gently paint that contrast paint into the mouth section. We're obviously going to paint the teeth later, but for now it'll just give it a good base in there. It should already be dark in there as we've not really painted that section, so it should work perfectly. So let's move on to obviously the focal point of this model, which is the Battle Standard itself, which is a whole collection of different pieces of flesh stitched together. Beautiful thing, beautiful. So we're going to do a mixture of base coats here, and we're going to paint each different section. Now remember, whatever section you paint on the front, we need to make sure we paint the back section in the same way, so that if you turn it around it's still the same colour. So we're going to start with a layer of Rakkar flesh on certain elements. We've gone with the top left piece here and a few of the side panels, and then we're going to go with Wraithbone and paint a few other elements as well, leaving some of the middle sections to be maybe a bit more fresh, where maybe this thing's fallen apart more recently as the flesh is rotted, just to give a different tonal feel across the battle standard here. We're then going to go in with some very different colours, and we're going to go in with Bugman's Glow on some of the small parts in the middle. We can be a little bit messy here, to be honest, as we're just base coating, but again, everything should be nice and watered down. And you may want to do 2 coats, especially if the Bugman's Glow. We're then going to go in with Doomball Brown and paint that in too. Just one piece of that colour, just to give it a bit of a differentiation from the really pale skins that they may have got from some animal or humans potentially. Then we're going to get Reikland Flesh Shade and Agrax Earth Shade and kind of just douse it all over these flesh areas, and you can mix it on the model. Now be careful as you do this not to mix your pots of wash together, so you may want to use a palette or make sure your brush is empty before going back into the other colour. We're just going to get it all over the banner's flesh. So it's going to look really grubby, really messy and quite unclean. And metal models don't take the wash quite as well as a lot of the plastic models do these days. So you will find it pools in strange places, but that's not too much of a problem because we're going to go back over all of the Rakkar Flesh elements with Rakkar Flesh, leaving our mixture of washes in the recesses. Again, keep this very watered down. You kind of want to glaze over what you've previously painted. We'll then do the same with Wraithbone, which is a little bit more bright, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to paint that in. But take your time and let the watered down paint just glaze over any of the wash that's sort of partially shaded. We'll then do a bit more Bugman's Glow on the pink section, which is maybe a bit more of a fresh element, a fresh piece they've pieced onto their battle standard here. Truly disgusting, but delightful if you love Beastmen. And then finally, relayering Doomball Brown over the Doomball Brown sections. So this is kind of a focal point of the model. There's still quite a few steps that we want to go through here to finish this banner. So we're going to dry brush everything now to make it look really rugged and disgusting. So the Wraithbone sections, we're going to dry brush over that with Flayed One Flesh, and this is more of a dusting. You don't want to go too hard on this because it will cover up all of that work you've done on the relayering, which is going to make it look grubby and awful. So just a very light dry brush of the Flayed One Flesh here. And then over the Wraithbone sections, we'll do again the same feathering motion with White Scar over the Wraithbone elements that we've previously painted. On the Bugman's Glow area, we'll get some Kislev Flesh, just gently dry brush this in. I've used quite a large old brush here. I feel like if anybody's got a smaller little dry brush or a specific brush they use for dry brushing, you might need something smaller. And then the Doomball Brown areas, we'll just dry brush that with some Gore4 Brown. I think the feathering word's quite good here. It's not a hardcore dry brush. We're not making the Gore4 Brown the predominant colour, we're just giving it a little bit extra. We're going to mix some Berserker Bloodshade with Lamia Medium, 50-50. We're going to sort of paint that around where everything's been stitched together to make it look like maybe things are starting to rot, maybe things were bruised, maybe some of this skin wasn't dead at the time it was cut up. And then we'll get some Athonian Camo Shade, again a 50-50 mix of Lamia Medium. Just add that into the areas as well, but also spread a little bit of it around onto the lower parts of the banner, and as well just a few of the kind of more beaten up bits, just to make it look like it's actually starting to rot. So the banner is quite a huge part of the model there, but now we're going to move into the steel and the chainmail. So we're going to paint everything here with Iron Warriors. Now I find chainmail on old metal models actually quite difficult to paint. It's kind of like the surface tension of the paint doesn't go in there, so you've almost got to stipple it in to the chainmail sections, which is not an issue with newer models. You'll find that you'll only really dry brush it effectively, even if your paintbrush is loaded up. So you may need to stipple the Iron Warriors in. Once that is dry, which may take a while due to the reasons just mentioned, you're then going to want to get some Nuln Oil and wash all of the metal elements. Be quite generous, especially with the weapons, as it's really going to help that metal look dirty, grubby and dark. We'll then grab some Iron Hand Steel, and we're just going to paint the edges of all the weapons here and any other metal elements that aren't the chainmail. And we'll go around all the edges, and then we're going to paint a few extra flecks and lines on that cutting edge to make it look like it's still sharper than it seems. And then for the chainmail, we're going to do a very gentle, I'd call it like an overpaint. It's almost a dry brush, but more of an overpaint. We're kind of just like rolling the brush along the model, but it's not necessarily been fully dried. And now just pick out the top parts of the chainmail. And then we'll go in with Stormhost Silver, last. Pick out any of the nails and screws, and just do a fine edge on the edge of those weapons. And on the chains here, just pick out the top sections to make it look like they're gleaming even amidst the darkness. Next up, we're going to do the horns. There's a lot of horns on this guy, and then also the bones and the skulls. So we're going to base coat all of them with Steel Legion Drab to start. Again, make sure this is nice and watered down, nice and smooth. You may want to do 2 coats. Because this is an old school metal model, it can be quite difficult to see where the detail begins and ends. So there's a little bit of trial and error here. But you've got his bones, his hooves, and you've also got the skull at the top of the banner of a Tuskor, I believe. And then you've also got 2 skulls hanging on chains that need to be painted. We'll then go over all of this with Agrac's Earthshade. Be fairly liberal, but be careful around all the work you've previously painted. And we're going to start with a 4-step process now to finish these skulls and horns. Starting with Baneblade Brown, we're going to make sure all of these paints are nicely watered down so they're almost glazing each other over. So we're not really covering any of them specifically, we're just building up the texture and the colour. So that Baneblade Brown can go over everything we've just painted, leaving the Agrac's Earthshade in the recesses. Our next step up is Karak's Stone, which is a slightly lighter colour. And we're going to obviously keep it the same, nice and watered down. And we're going to paint over what we've already done, but leaving some of that Baneblade Brown visible. And then, of course, just building it up, adding that texture so that it slowly starts to look more like bone and horn. Flayed One Flesh is the sort of final colour that makes a huge difference, and this one's very clearly needing to be a little bit more watered down. And we can also use it to glaze the top of the skulls and give it that real bone looking effect. And on the horns, of course, we're working our way down, especially the one on the banner. We're sort of blending it down into the darker textures. And then our final of the 4, White Scar, we've probably watered this down a little bit more, and we're just going to make sure the top of the skulls are bright and white, and that the end of the horn is as white as it can possibly be. And then we're almost going to edge highlight everything else with a bit of white, maybe picking out the edge of the teeth and just the edge of the ridges on our Wargor's horns here. And the hooves as well, we're just going to paint lines in to make it look like they're ridged too. So a real quick element here. Now we've painted the banner and the weapons and the horns, we can get in and paint the banner pole and the weapon sort of shaft. So we're going to base coat both of these with Dryad Bark. You may want to do 2 coats, but this colour covers very well, so you should be able to get away with just 1. And once that is dry, we can grab some Nuln Oil once again and just be generous and wash this all over. But you're going to want to be careful where this is going. Make sure it's not like pooling on your banner or pooling around the weapon axe head. We'll then gently get a small dry brush. In this case, I've got an old beaten up 1 size brush, and we'll just brush that over the wooden textures here. We'll then get a really light dry brush of Baneblade Brown on all of the wooden sections. You want to make sure you've got as little paint on the brush as possible and just feather it around all of the different elements, focusing on the ends of the banner really, and just the end of that axe shaft to make it stand out a bit more. So for the Beastmen army in general, a lot of their fabric is either red or the burgundy, and I thought my characters tend to be on the burgundy side. So we're going to get in with some Baraknar burgundy and do 2 coats of this. You may need 3. For a base coat it is quite thin, especially when you add the water to keep it smooth. It almost becomes layer paint. So just take your time with this. There's not a lot of fabric on this model, but you want to work around gently because you've already got all of your lovely chainmail finished previously. We'll then move to Nuln Oil once again. Now, we're not using a red wash here because the red washes are a very similar tone and won't really give us much definition. So again, we're going with the black wash. We're not going to be too liberal, almost like paint this on, because we don't want it to go everywhere and kind of cover over all the lovely work we've already done. We'll then grab the Baraknar burgundy from the palette that we just used to base coat this chap and relayer over, leaving the Nuln Oil sections that look almost purpley now in the recesses. Baraknar burgundy doesn't really have specific layer paints that I feel work nicely with it. So we're going to mix Baraknar burgundy 75-25, so 3 parts to 1 part flayed 1 flesh, just to keep the colour nice and bright and not too chalky. And we're going to go in and relayer over, but just a little bit less, leaving some of that Baraknar burgundy in the recesses. And then we'll do a 50-50 mix, Baraknar burgundy and flayed 1 flesh, which is kind of getting more towards a skin tone colour in a way. So you may be able to go up to Cadian flesh tone or something here maybe if you don't want to mix paints. And we're just going to edge paint all around the fabric, all the edges, and then any of the folds or creases, we'll just run a gentle line down those. There are a few additional brass and metal bits that we just need to work on that we couldn't do previously, as there was a lot of other stuff going on, and we want them to be a bit brighter than the Iron Warrior elements. So we're going to start by just painting the chaotic elements on the front, Iron Hand Steel. Again with metal paints, you don't want to use a wet palette, just use a standard dry palette, and as you paint, just keep adding a little bit of water to your pool of paint that you've removed from the pot, and you should be good to go. We're then going to grab some Ruin Lord brass and paint a few of the little kind of coins that are on his front, and a couple of the rings that are on the top of the weapon. There's a few other elements scattered around the model as well that you can paint in. Now, rather than picking a specific wash for each specific metal, I feel he is a beast man, he's grubby and nasty. We're going to get in with Nuln Oil and wash both the Ruin Lord brass elements and the Iron Hand Steel elements in the same wash. We'll then relayer over the Ruin Lord brass with Ruin Lord brass, just leaving that wash in the recess. There's not much of this, so just run it around the way you can. And then we'll do the same with Iron Hand Steel. Different to the Iron Warriors where you let the wash do a lot of the work, we're actually going to repaint over all of the Iron Hand Steel elements, leaving that Nuln Oil only in the recesses rather than leaving it as the main textural element of the metal, just to differentiate the two quite nicely. And then finally we'll grab Stormhost Silver and just edge highlight all of these different pieces, both the Ruin Lord brass elements and the Iron Hand Steel elements, painting all the rivets and all the edges as best you can. And on the coins on the front, just paint the bottom crest, maybe like the bottom 25% of the circumference. You don't need to do the whole thing. And here's where we're at so far with our Wargor Battle Standard Bearer. There's not a lot of steps left to go. He's getting there. Of course, there's a lot of banner still to work on. And there's a lot more work than maybe I initially thought, but it's been a lot of fun to get this guy done. So we're going to move to the top of the banner now. There's a severed elven head and some rotting flesh that's sort of on our, I think it's a Tuskgore, maybe. I don't actually know what animal that is. we'll just call it a creature, and we're going to paint the flesh that's kind of lopping off the skull. Rakar flesh. It's a very similar colour, of course, to what we've already painted on the bone, but it will just give it a tonal difference in the end, trust me. We're then going to paint our elf with flayed one flesh. This is obviously a layer paint, so you will want to do 2 coats of this. Let the first one dry, of course, before applying the second one. We're then going to get Agrak's Earthshade and wash the sort of lopping flesh off our creature / Tuskor. And don't worry too much if you get this on the bone. In fact, it might be quite a good idea to let it drift into the recesses a little bit, because it'll just blend it in with the skull a bit more. Maybe look like there's still some connective tissue or something connecting it to what's left of the skull. And then our elf, we're going to make them look particularly unwell, because they've definitely seen better days, and we're going to wash that with a phony and camo shade. And we'll additionally get a little bit of that as well, and just wash that in with the Agrak's Earthshade that we've applied to the creature too. We're then going to get some Berserker Bloodshade and sort of paint that over our elf in areas and mix it in with the green. And then on our creature, we'll paint that around the kind of gruesome-y part underneath that left eye. We'll then re-layer with Rakar flesh over the creature's remaining skin, leaving the kind of mixture of washes in the recesses here. Pretty gruesome work, but now you can start to see it is just different enough from our banner and our skeleton to it's kind of 3 very different tones. And our very bright elf here, we're going to relayer over with flayed one flesh, leaving again them reddy green washes in the recesses. So he's certainly seen better days, but he was certainly maybe alive more recently than our creature was. We'll also have highlighted our flesh on the creature with the flayed one flesh, and once that's finished, we'll grab a mixture of flayed one flesh and white scar, 50-50, and we're just going to highlight the elf with this, not the creature's skin. And then finally, we'll get some white scar, and this we're going to make sure is nice and diluted, nice and almost glazy, and just do the real edges of all the flesh on the elf's head. Additionally here, you want to paint in the chap's eyes. We'll then get some Flesh Tearer's red and just paint that around the obviously open wound of the neck. And then underneath that left eye, there's some pretty gruesome looking bloody bits that need to be painted on the creature as well. We'll add some further effects to this later, but this is just a base for that to work. Now we'll move on to the pelt, which is on the back of the banner, and then all the belts. There's a lot of belts on our model across his chest and across the middle. And we're going to paint this with Corvus Black. Apologies for the blurry footage here. I don't know why that happened. But we'll give all of this 2 coats of Corvus Black, make sure it's nice and watered down, and of course at this point be as careful as you can because we're really close to finishing. That focus is a little bit better. We're going to grab some Nuln Oil and bring this down to pure black in the recesses. Of course, you'll want 2 brushes. You can have a nice big brush to do this, and then you're going to probably want something quite small just to run the Nuln Oil around all the belts that are around his waist and his chest. We'll then get in with some Mechanical Standard Grey and do 2 applications. On the belts, we're just going to do a nice edge highlight of this on the top and the bottom. But then on the pelt, we've got a little bit more real estate. We're just going to dry brush this. But you can kind of feather it across, and you can focus on the top of the hairs if you wish, because that's the element we're going to see the most of. But of course, take your time, don't go too ham with it. Just run it gently across there. We'll then get some Dawnstone, and we'll just add that to the belts and straps across his chest, just giving the top elements of those a nice fine edge highlight. And again, we'll do a really gentle feather of this as a dry brush across the top of our pelt. Moving on to the binding and the bandages and the elf's hair, we're going to do this all at once. So we're going to get some XV88, and we're going to paint a few of the binding straps that are sort of holding on our coins. There's a few other elements around the model that you can paint in this as well. Moving to Wraithbone, we're just going to paint all of the bandages around the weapon. We'll then grab some Agrax Earthshade and wash all of those XV88 elements. That's the hair of the elf, the little straps, and then also don't forget the Wraithbone elements we've just done on that bandaging around the weapon. Next up, we're going to layer over that XV88 section with some Talon sand, which do a very delicate little gentle highlight on these straps, painting the knots and painting the string. And then on the hair of the elf, we'll just do some lines that run along, leaving the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. For the hair only, we're going to mix 50-50 Talon sand and Flayed One Flesh, and just pick out the highest elements of that hair, just to make it look like it's the sun's hitting it effectively from above. Of course, you can pick any colour hair you want for your elf, but we've gone with this light brown look. On the Wraithbone elements, we're just going to go back in with Wraithbone and relayer over all of this, leaving the Agrax Earthshade only in the recesses. Now, I find with bandages, they kind of, especially on Beastmen models, they go diagonally, left, right, up, down. Do your best to kind of pull the brush down, up and down in one way and work your way along systematically. And then again, finally, we'll grab some white scar and just paint each ridge. Now, you don't have to paint every single ridge, but you can just do the top elements like I'm doing here, and then flip them all around and do the same thing. One beautiful thing about the older metal models is that they are cast almost in two sides, so a lot of the detail is sort of hidden by other stuff, so there's not as much to normally paint. We'll zoom in a little bit here, and we're going to paint the Wargor's eyes. One of his eyes was completely visible, and then the other eye basically isn't cast, as far as I could tell. So you're just going to get a very small brush. This is a Winsor & Newton size 0. Very watered down, Evil Sun Scarlet. We're just going to get in there with a dab of red, and then with a small layer brush here, we're just going to add a bit of Berserker Blood shade around the eye. Now, it doesn't matter if it goes on the eyelids here, just make sure you don't add too much of the wash. We'll then go back to Evil Sun Scarlet, which should hopefully still be on our palette and be nice and wet. Just going to get a bead of this, take your time, line everything up, and just add that to the very top of the eyeball here, covering it over, leaving that blood shade in the sort of recesses. And then just to make it look a little bit more angry, I'm just going to do a dot of Troll Slayer Orange Rye on the edge of the eyeball. Now, Beastmen wouldn't be right without a little bit of rust, so we're going to stipple a little bit of Rhinox hide in. So, unlike dry brushing, you do want a little bit of this paint still to be on the brush, but you also want to dab it off vertically into a tissue, and then you can take the paint and just dab it into the recesses. And on this model, we're only doing it into the sort of front face of our axe here. We'll then do the same with Troll Slayer Orange, and I find it's quite nice to mix this into the tissue with the Rhinox hide, so you get some bits of it Troll Slayer Orange and some bits of it have mixed. So we're very nearly done. We're going to do some effects now. So we're going to get some blood for the Blood God, and we're going to stipple it on in a very similar to fashion to how we've just done the rust, but we're not going to take too much of it off the brush. And my army had a sort of dual symmetrical insignia that I painted on all the old banners, and I felt that Beastmen wouldn't paint things on so graphically, so I thought that's a cool way of doing it. And in this case, I thought, well, they would probably just use what came to them, which is the blood of whatever victim they stumbled across recently. So I've painted the insignia here on the front and back by just stippling the blood in to the banner, and it's not beautiful, but then Beastmen aren't beautiful. It's not graphically pleasing, because Beastmen wouldn't do graphically pleasing things. So it's quite a cool way of trying to do something a bit different. I did do a lot of passes on this just to thicken it up and make it look really crusty and nasty. And whilst we were doing this, we're just going to add a bit of blood for the blood god into those severed sections on our elven head, and the creature on the left side of the flesh that sort of flopped off. And with that, our Wargor Battle Standard Bearer is finished. I have been waiting to paint this model for a very long time. I've never been able to really source one. So the fact that, say what you like about Games Workshop, the fact that they were able to re-release this, even though I'm sure there'll be a new plastic one released in the future, it was awesome. It's always lovely to paint an oldhammer model, and the opportunities don't come around very often. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Do like and subscribe if you have the time, and if you don't, no worries. Lovely to have you here. Additionally, we've got a new WhatsApp community set up. You can find the link in our channel description via our link.bio page. Feel free to jump in. We're starting from scratch. There's a few folks in there already, so it'd be lovely to see you there. Additionally, we've just kind of set up our Patreon. Now, I'm not sure if it's something you guys would be interested in at the moment, but let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think of the different levels, whether or not they're good. But again, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.